I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch One, and thanks for logging on. Well, today we have a special guest and a special feature for you. We've had collectors, we've featured watches, but we've never had a collector who built his own watches. I'm joined today by Mr. Jorn Werdelin of Linde Werdelin Watches. How are you doing, Jorn?
I'm very well. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm doing awesome. Actually, he's doing better than I am because he's here in Miami on vacation right now. We're actually going to do a little bit of a survey of how one gets into the watch industry as a manufacturer and what it's like once you're there. Could you give me a little history personally, how you got started in watches?
Well, it started out 2 generations ago because my grandfather and father had watch and jewelry retail in Denmark. But specifically for Linde Werdelin, we started in 2002. And it took us about 5 years before we sold our first watch, before we had made our first watch. So in 2007, approximately 10 years ago, we started selling. And since 2007, we have produced about 5,000 pieces. So we really adhere to something that's scarce, and I think that's something that what we like about the luxury end of the watches. But starting a watch company, I guess, needs to come from passion, because you really have to, I guess, love the idea of watches and the intricacies of it and the whole industry and everything else that's been made in, beforehand, because you can't make a watch independent of everything else. It kind of needs to be like a lineage of things that came before.
And I know you also have a background in banking, and if it were just about commerce and profit, you probably would have stayed in that. I mean, the watch really does require a little bit more heart and PCU invested in it. And you also have a partner, and I think it was kind of the combination of the two of you that created the DNA of the brand.
I think it's very much a partnership, and Morten is the creative part of Linde Werdelin, and as you said, I'm probably more of the commercial part of it. I did work in investment banking, actually for U.S. investment banks for about a decade, and it certainly taught me things about the industry, how a company is run, how it should be run, the products, the importance of customers, and so forth. But at the end of the day, now I've been doing watchmaking for 15 years, so it vastly overtakes any investment banking experience.
I can relate to that. You see, Jorn has found the secret sauce. He's found a way to actually be in watches and also make money, whereas I found a way to be in watches and make less money. So
I wish that was the truth.
This is like the ultimate collector equation going here. So now, I think 2 interesting things strike me with your watches. First, you had the idea to found a brand, and it was one part the watch and one part the idea of how you would use the watch. All your watches from the beginning were designed for a sports computer.
Yeah. That brings back the word passion, and I don't want to use it as a cliche, but I've always loved skiing, and I also love diving. I don't dive as much as I ski, and back in 2002, Morten, he was making a watch for a Danish jewelry brand called, or is still called, Jorn, and it was meant for sailors. So you could take the outer case off and you could change the strap for something that would work on a boat and something that would work onshore. And that was kind of the start of the idea of Linde Werdelin. I at the same time had been heli-skiing in Canada. And as you know, when you ski in Canada or anywhere else in heli, you pay for the amount of feet you ski.
Okay.
So we're very concerned about the feet going up and down, up and down. And that kind of brought us into, what about if you have a piece and it's mechanical and it's beautiful, and it has sort of all, the Swiss elements of a timepiece, and then we can just add functionality to it. And I think the idea came more as well, it was more an idea rather than the physical manifestation of it. And remember, 2002 was 5 years before the iPhone came out.
True.
So ours was really the first smart watch, which is not entirely true because Tissot, T-Touch, they had already done, the one where you push. But there were some things going on with information and digital and electronics, and then the mechanical. And when we had this idea, people said, no, you can't do it, and it shouldn't be done. It's not luxury, and it's not cool, etc., etc. But the reality is that those two universes, skiing and diving, inspired the construction of the cases. So hence why you have the Spido case, which is skeletonized.
Yes.
And the reasoning for that was that we wanted to make the watch light.
Okay.
And so back in 2007, 2008, we had an expedition going to Everest. And when they came down, they only took the watch to base camp, which is at 5,500 meters. And for the rest, they just took the instrument. And we asked them, well, why not the watch? Why didn't you use the clip-on functionality? And said, well, because every gram matters. So why don't you make a watch in titanium? And Morten, who is never satisfied with something simple, he went back and said, well, anybody can do a titanium watch. Why don't we, do like with a racing car? We strip everything unnecessary away, and from that we made our first skeletonized watch case, which was a limited edition of 20 pieces, as far as I remember, which was sold online, and we made the cases ourselves in Copenhagen. We had a lot of cases that failed. That piece was called the Trigon.
Okay.
And we've never seen the Trigons ever after. I've never seen them online. I never see anyone for sale.
We've never had one pre-owned.
No.
That's a rare watch.
And that is before the original Spido lights, which, as you also said, we made back in 2009 when we presented the first Spido lights at Basel. We did one particular one with a Danish watchmaker called Svend Andersen.
Svend Andersen, founder of the AHCI, noted independent, actually collaborated with Linde Werdelin on a couple of occasions, but starting with actually, I've got a little picture of it right here. I've got the 2009 Spido Light SA for Svend Andersen, permanent part of my set. You guys may have noticed with the Hawkeyes out there. But I guess that's another interesting question, because for the number of watches you make, you don't make many. You have many variations, but they're all a variation on the same 44 millimeter by 46 millimeter footprint. I guess between the collaborations like the tattoos, the Svend Andersen models, how do you evolve from one model to the next without actually changing the shape and dimensions? Because they all have to work with the same computer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of have the answer in the reverso.
Okay.
I mean, that's a piece that has been done exactly the same way since 1931. And I guess to some sense, that's the original sports watch.
Yeah, you're right. That is.
And I mean, at least for me, I think every important, every relevant watch brand sticks with the original DNA. Then I mean, you have this very little space to work with, and I have to give credit to Morten for being able to, we work a lot with materials, we worked a little some with movements, but we stick very closely to where we started out. But we have done 78 series of watches in the last 10 years. But they only spread across the original biphometers, and then the Spido family and the Octopus family. And the Spido family is the one going up, so weight reduction, and the Octopus family is going down into the sea, which is essentially about anti-corrosion. That was kind of the simple story behind it, that we wanted to only work with materials that would not be corroded by salt.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that you've had almost 80 different variations, but you've got one fundamental case shape, and you said you've only sold about 5,000 to 6,000 watches total. Yep. So, I mean, it's almost like every version of the watch you make is a micro run. I mean, what's Morten's life like with all this constant redesigning? What does he look to for inspiration? I mean, are you part of that planning process? Where do you guys find the ideas?
I think he's stressed. No, I mean, we spend a lot of time discussing what's the idea, and but you can come up with something new, all the time. And we just did this version with a customizing house,
yes,
called T Black in London, and the idea was that companies such as T Black, they generally do modified APs, Rolexes, etc., etc. And there is a customer segment that is interested in something which is unique and different. So I went to the team at T Black, and they apparently really liked what we do, which was great. And we said to them, listen, if we gave you a couple pieces, what would you do to them? What would be your interpretation of a Linde Werdelin? And they did this, the spider speed, which you have just shown, and the spider light also. And it was almost like they went back to the original, which is also why we call the monochrome, because the first spider lights and the first spider speeds, they were more or less monochrome.
Okay.
And so yet again, you can get a different interpretation just with a little bit of change into the dial and, some other inspiration. The circular,
of course,
pattern in the dial was something that they do. So that was kind of their contribution to a Linde Werdelin spider speed and spider light.
Okay, so you've switched through several complications, dial styles, textures, materials. Also, like you said, you have that permanent bifurcation between the Octopus water watch and the Spido family, which is your land sports watch, but you never lost what you consider to be the core DNA of your design, that shape, the compatibility, the fundamental idea of a modular watch. And it's not just the reef and the rock computers that are modular. The strap's modular, the buckle's modular. It seems like from the beginning you thought that strap swapping and do-it-yourself strap swapping was going to be something that would help define the brand.
Well, remember where Lego come from?
Yes, I do.
No, but I mean, there's clearly, the watches, they are Swiss made, and they have to be because it's very small, kind of runs of production. And they, we have about 25 different companies that works for us for different parts of the watch. But the cultural aspect of Linde Werdelin is definitely with a Danish heritage. And I think you can see that in some ways into the design, though I would always argue against us being Danish design, which I think is very minimalistic. And we are kind of maxi minimalistic. But you can see that the functionality is very much paired with the aesthetics. And kind of the innovation and the practicality and also that obviously we do like our customers to change their strap. I mean I have a blue strap on today, but on other days I have it with a black strap, or it depends on the mood.
And so basically all these straps pretty much work with all these watches.
All straps work with all watches, and to some extent changing the strap gives you a new watch.
That's fact.
And we have many customers who say when I go to work, I'll have it on the black strap, but then I go on the beach or whatever I do, then I put on my colorful strap, or I go on summer holidays, and it's a different watch.
Yeah, and that's a fact. And I think it's interesting because even Panerai, which is a major strap swapping brand on a fan base basis, it's not like every single strap will fit every single watch, but you really do have interchangeability from textile to leather to rubber, which is interesting. I mean, you do have a dramatic amount of variation considering how much is standardized across the watches. So I guess the question then becomes, what's the genesis of a watch like? Where does it start? I mean, creating a watch from scratch for the Linde Werdelin catalog.
You have to ask Morten that question.
Fair enough. And, he's next on the show.
It's a little bit forward, but it's also going back and looking into the history. And obviously at the beginning that was different or difficult because there wasn't much or any history. Okay. So when, go back 2009, that was not a difficult time in the industry. And we were exhibiting in Basel. And we were literally chasing customers, and the funny thing was that and that's where online also impacted, sort of kind of at the first time, because we're doing this edition that you mentioned with Sven Andersen, and actually it was the only watch that people came to look at, and we got people, journalists and colleagues from other brands, etc., and I just want to see this watch, and then we knew that bang, we have something right here is something, and that's kind of when we. Said well, we have the Spider family and we have the Octopus family, skiing and for diving. Since then, I think everything has been a little okay. Let's take one step forward, but let's also look back right? One step forward, but let's look back. So that's like a clear DNA, a clear continuation of pieces. And interestingly enough, when we were in your other department before, and I saw one of our cases, right?
Oh, yes.
I can sort of see, oops, that's right? And obviously I can't, because I, rarely look at other watches. But it is important, also from a customer's point of view, that the piece that they're wearing has a connection back to the original timepiece. So, so if you take some of the first watches, I think people are still, very happy owning those watches, and they can see that we are still proud of this piece, because even the newest pieces, they look like this.
That's true, and you can actually,
that's the same.
I'll be your hand model here for the macro camera, but you can actually see one of the earliest pieces, known as the One. This is the One, right next to the Moonlight, the Octopus Moonlight, and it's the same case profile, it's the same case dimensions. Both of them will work with the same straps and the same computer, but those watches are separated by about a decade in terms of actual production. Okay, so other questions, I guess. Now, we talked a lot about pre-owned, because at Watch You Want, pre-owned is all we do. Linde Werdelin kind of ambitiously embracing the idea of pre-owned through Linde Werdelin Vintage last year, offering kind of a curated selection of pre-owned Linde Werdelin watches. All of this sort of pivots around the notion of the watch industry changing. With respect to the internet, things like Watch You Want TV and Linde Werdelin Vintage, how is pre-owned, new media, and the watch industry all part of this change that you've seen in the industry?
It's an essential part, and our industry, to some extent, still works in the 1980s, and has been resisting online, digital, social media for a long time. I know now everybody embraces it.
Yes.
But listen, these things were, YouTube, how long ago was that started? 10, 15 years ago?
Honestly, I got out of college in 2006. People were like, you got to see this new thing. It's YouTube. People make their own videos.
Yeah. So, and only 10 years later do we sit here. But online, digital, social media, pre-owned is changing the industry. And kind of the beauty of a watch is that it will exist for a very long time, hopefully. And also that the design of it should last. And, one of our colleagues used this piece of advertising that you never own a watch, but it's inherited. And there is some truth in that for a good watch. And we have seen a surging interest in our, pre-owned or historical pieces. And we see that generally in the industry. Some of the big brands, obviously they're collectors. And also, I think the pricing, of a new watch is much more impacted by the pre-owned pricing these days. So 10 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago, you could have different priced watches in different markets. Very classically, you would go to Japan and you would see any watch brand that would be priced 20 to 40% above what they would be in Europe or Switzerland. These days, that's practically gone, because people travel more. They go online, they check prices. They don't care whether a piece comes from Singapore or from Miami.
Oh, yeah.
So we saw that a few years ago. We would have customers coming in to us in London, and they would look at, say the Moonlight.
Okay.
And they wanted, etc. But then they would say, listen, I can see it online here. It's 6 months old. It looks new, which it should. I can get it, 20, 30% off. And it's very hard for us to argue against that, to say to a customer, don't buy the pre-owned, buy the new one from us. So, in that instance, when my team, they would come to me and say, Jorn, what should we do here? I say, what? Tell the customer, go and buy the pre-owned, right? And if he wants a new strap, we'll sell him a new strap. And again, it's a little bit like, we were referencing to the car industry before, is that the car industry, some time ago, they started really taking care of the
idea that a car is something you can monetize more than once. If a car has a service life of 10 years, why not take it back from a lease that's a 2-year lease and sell the car again?
Yep. And you know, you have all the high end, I mean, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Aston Martin, etc. They repair their old cars. So they kind of take care of all their production. So when we launched LW Vintage, it was a little bit the same as to say, you know what, we will take care of all our customers, right? You know, if a customer comes to us and he wants to swap, he wants to have a newer Linde Werdelin, or indeed he just wants to sell it because he has the interest of another watch,
yes.
You know, we will try and facilitate that. And I think also that's partly why we're sitting here, because, you know, we reached out to you and say, listen, guys, you in the US, we know you sell, you know, quite a few Linde Werdelins. You know, how does that work? You know, is there anything that, you know, we can talk about, you know, to get a better understanding, et cetera, et cetera. And it's also a realization that, you know, pre-owned is, it maybe even a bigger industry than the new watches. And actually the volume of watches that should be produced going forward should be lower than it has been in the last decade and a half.
This is a fact. I mean, if you look at the annual production of the Swiss watch industry, every year, tens of millions of watches, you know, up to 30 million watches will be made. Now, many of those are going to be Swatch and Flick Flack, but if you look at the pure luxury, consider that these watches have a 100-year service life. I've got a pocket watch on my set that came from 1880, and that is not as well built as a modern wristwatch. So these watches last forever. 2 years down the line, they still look like new watches if they've been treated well, and they still operate like new watches. So I can definitely see where you're coming from in terms of the watches never aging out of the market. They're not, I mean, this is not sushi.
No.
It's not done and dusted 2 days later. So they will continue to come back, and the best way to offer them is to buy them back yourself, vet them, sell them with a warranty, and give the customer the kind of pre-owned, you know, peace of mind you'd have with something like Mercedes, BMW, Lexus. And also, it's worth mentioning that of the few brands doing factory pre-owned these days, you know, it's you with Linde Werdelin,
yep.
It's Audemars Piguet, and it's FP Jorn. All brands that are outside of the major groups. I mean, does being an independent with roots in Britain and Denmark and Switzerland give you a different perspective on the industry than maybe a group brand that's always been Swiss?
For sure that we are not Swiss in Switzerland, that gives us a different angle of, you know, what we're doing. I mean, we have very high respect for the product itself, without making it more important in so many other things that are going around in the world today. And also, we have always, I was always like, and still am, it is the end customer. You know, that's important. It's the end customer that buys our piece. It's the end customer that wears it, needs to have it serviced, you know, et cetera, and is also our best advocate for the next customer. So, you know, in 2008, we engaged with bloggers. We have done direct all the time since we started. We have the triads where people can, you know, borrow a watch for 5 days to try it at home. And we looked at the car industry and said, you know, I would never buy a car unless I could drive it.
A test drive.
Yeah, a test drive. So I think not being part of the traditional sort of inbuilt system of this is the way distribution works, this is the way awareness works, this is the way production works. We looked at it and say, you know what, guys, as we started out, because we did not have a lot of money, and we still don't. We said we can't do print because it is so expensive and we can't measure it. So, you know, we went to bloggers. We have engaged in social media since the very early days, and I think our sort of ability to kind of sideline the traditional ways of doing business has also been the reason that we are still here, and you know, I wouldn't say thriving in the year 2017, but we are still doing well in a very difficult market, and it's because we are close to our customer.
And I mean, the things that you're doing unconventionally, just to count them, obviously you do sales off your website. This is something that's not common in the luxury watch industry, direct sales to customers. You're embracing pre-owned, you're buying back, you're previously sold watches going back as far as the 2006 debut models, and you're selling them with a 2-year warranty.
Yeah.
You sell accessories online direct. You have a blog on your website that's actually updated and written by the founders of the company. And, not for nothing, but I know many folks are quite fond of the graphic novel you guys created a few years back. Maybe because that's one of the top questions I get about Linde Werdelin, those graphic novel installments. Where did that idea come from? Because I know you don't do conventional print, and you
Nope.
didn't have a lot of money to spend on advertising.
No. So, I mean, I have to give it credit to a woman that works for us as a marketing director for 3 or 4 years, and she will know who she is. And she's been very successful in the watch sector afterwards also. But when I interviewed her first, she said, "Jorn, why don't you do a cartoon?" And I was so intrigued by it. I said, "No, but you can't do that." And that was exactly the reason that, no, you can't do that. And I looked around, and nobody else did it. And I thought it was a great idea, and it was, something that also, because we created a story around, obviously, it was a cartoon or graphic novel.
Of course.
But we had we had Morten and me in there, and other people that we knew. I think even Ariel had a cameo appearance in
Ariel Adams did?
Yeah. And we asked him about it, though. I think he was quite pleased.
He had a cameo on this show, too.
And it was an engagement, and it was also provocation to do something different, and it really worked very well for 3 or 4 years. But then we felt, okay, now we've done this, now we move on to something different.
So the only constant really is going to be the watch, the quality of the watch, your philosophy of not designing your customers into planned obsolescence. Everything else, from how you sell watches to how you sell direct, how you advertise watches, that's always in flux. And I guess maybe that's where being an independent brand and not having the inertia of traditions is a big advantage.
Yes, I think so.
So now let me ask you 2 questions that always come up when people ask me about people who actually manufacture watches. In your case, it's always about the cartoons and the graphic novels, but it's also, in general, about if you make your own watch and your name is on a watch, do you collect other brands? Are there other watches in your collection? Or have you ever wanted like a Patek Philippe or a Jaeger-LeCoultre?
Well, funnily enough, my last watch before we started Linde Werdelin was a JLC Granspor with an 8-day power reserve. And before that, yes, I did have other watches because, as I said, my father had watch and jewelry shops. So I've always been surrounded by watches, and so I used to own, quite a few, Cartiers. Actually one of the first Santos, and I had the Bulgari Scuba when it first came out. But I don't collect watches, and I don't think I'm not so much for ownership. And I, maybe also that's what can sort of relate me to the younger generation.
Okay. That
doesn't really need to own a lot of stuff. And I see it with cars. I mean, my car was stolen, again, a year and a half ago, and I live in London, and with Uber and with with the two, I kind of I mean, do I need to own a car? No. It's just it's more hassle than. Than satisfaction, or so no. I mean, I wouldn't be collecting watches.
So it's nice because you have the experience of the newest Linde Werdelin watches as they come through. You get to enjoy them, and then you move on to what comes next. So you actually get to enjoy more over time by not fixating on owning just a few references.
Yeah, you mean myself?
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, I mean, my 2 favorite watches for me.
Okay.
Is the Moon Tattoo, which we did 59 of, and then the Spider Light, which we launched a couple of years back at Basel, also in gold with the 3D movements, and we did 75 of this piece. But that's just for me, and it really depends on the person. We did this one also recently where. We got Johnny Dowell.
Oh yes, a one of one, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. So
based on this model.
Yes, we have this one, and also with the Octopus Blue Moon, which is titanium grade 5, and we get Johnny to do them one-on-one engravings, And again, it's involving other people. It's craftsmanship and doing something unique.
Okay. So I guess 2 questions, just to sort of wrap up our discussion. We've had a far-ranging discussion of your brand, your history, the industry. Just philosophically, is there a different type of watch or complication or métier d'art that you would like to see the Linde Werdelin brand explore? And is there a type of watch you would never make, either a dress watch or a lady's watch or anything that's off the board?
Well, we are working on a piece which is called the 1024, and we announced that as we were approaching 10 years at the end of 2016. And that's a watch that we only make pre-order,
Okay.
and only direct to customers, and it's a travel complication. So it's a 2-timer with a moon that swivels, or sun and moon that swivels, and then AM/PM functionality that we have designed and developed. But as I said, we will make up to 96 of each. We have one gold version and we have one in 3D-TP carbon. And again, it was kind of changing the way that we saw ourselves in the business. We went to Basel last time in 2016, it must have been. And we just saw this change in the industry and how the retailers were reacting. And we were launching this new piece, and we said, yes, we can't go to Basel and make 2 times 96 watches into this market. What do we do, and what do we want to do here? Well, we got a great customer base. Why don't we offer this only directly and exclusively to an existing customer base, and then make these pieces? And also, there will not be any other pieces, so they can't get discounted.
Yes.
They will only exist on the wrists of the people that bought them and had them made, by us, for them.
So it's not just a different watch; it's actually a very different business model for the watch industry.
Well, it's certainly also something that other brands, much bigger brands, they do make particular pieces for end customers and
certainly, but just the idea of doing away with sitting inventory, again, like you said, it's never going to be discounted, it's never going to be sold through to the gray market, it's only going to go to the hands of the person who's actually contracted for it. So not only is it more exclusive, but it's a bespoke experience.
Yep.
And I guess then the last thing, just, is there a type of watch you would never explore, just something that for whatever reason, personal preference or whim, you just said, nope, off the table? Type of watch you would not make?
Well, I mean, you said it. I wouldn't exclude any complication, but I do think that there are some complications that have been, overused, and I mean they're still beautiful. I mean, you take like a tourbillon, right? I mean, a tourbillon, say 10 years ago used to be extremely exclusive.
Yes.
These days, everybody can make it. Would we do a tourbillon? Well, I mean, maybe one day we would, I wouldn't exclude it, but I'm kind of thinking more of Linde Werdelin as a sports watch brand, and you can go to a brand, say, because I really respect them, someone like Urberg.
Yes.
I mean, Felix, is a gifted movement watchmaker. I am not a movement watchmaker, and neither is Morten. We are other things, so I think we contribute other things into our watches and into our brand, and I think that's maybe what we should stick to.
So you're saying basically there are many brands out there that have just gone and bought an off-the-shelf tourbillon and put it in the watch, but it doesn't fit the image of the brand. Unless you build it yourself, it doesn't say something about like the savoir-faire of the brand. You define yourself in terms of design, functionality, sporting utility, bespoke watchmaking, but not necessarily as a movement engineering house. And it would just seem contrived to put a tourbillon in a Linde Werdelin watch.
It's like being a man or a human, right? Is that I guess the older we get, the more we kind of fit into ourselves and feel good about what it is that we do, rather than trying as a teenager. And I've got teenage children. Not that I want to say anything about them, but you're testing and trying out.
Yes.
Who am I? What do I want to be? And sort of 10, 15 years into this, I think we're quite content. To where we are and how we fit into the industry and what Linde Werdelin is, and don't feel the urge to, let's try this, let's try that, and without sort of saying, is that really within the DNA of what we do, and is that what the customer at the end of the day wants us to make? Because if I got a lot of our clients coming to me or to us and say, Jorn, I mean, I really want to see a tourbillon ride. I think this particular model would look so beautiful, and it really fits into the universe about, a tourbillon works tremendously when you're up on the mountain, right? And I said, okay, you know what, that actually makes sense. Then, yes, maybe we would do it. It's as much to do with the dialogue between the customer and us. We're not like a closed, unit and not listening to...
And so I think the real difference there is that a lot of brands would just say, look, we're building a tourbillon watch and we're going to force it on the market whether it works or not, just because it's something different we haven't done before. You would have to see real interest from your clientele. So while it might not fit with the spirit of the brand at first impression, the customer is always right, but it has to be one or the other. It has to be the spirit of the brand or the demand of the customer. It's not something you just do because.
And it has to link together. I think it has to be within the DNA of the brand. And the DNA, it really comes from, very simply, watches that we make for skiing and for diving. And in particular, because I love skiing and I've been skiing since I was 6 years old. And that's what I do when I, relax, which, hopefully we'll get some more snow in Europe.
I'm the same way. I'm a road cyclist. I can identify with the passion on both levels, the watches and the athletics.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us and our audience.
Thank you, and thank you for listening, for everyone who's still listening.
Believe me, this has been my pleasure of the house. I want to thank you, Jorn, for coming on.
Excellent.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And enjoy the rest of your stay in the States.
Thank you, I will.
I'm Tim, he's Jorn, she's Werdelin. This is Watch Want, and thanks for logging on.